The Gospel is from Luke. It will seem like all hell is broken loose. Sun, moon, stars, earth, sea, in an uproar, and everyone all over the world in a panic. The wind knocked out of them by the threat of doom, the powers that be quaking. And then they'll see the Son of Man welcomed in grand style, a glorious welcome. When all this starts to happen, up on your feet. Stand tall with your heads high. Help is on the way. He told them a story. Look at a fig tree, any tree for that matter. When the leaves begin to show, one look tells you that summer is right around the corner. The same here. When you see these things happen, you know God's kingdom is about here. Don't brush this off. I'm not just saying this for some future generation, but for this one too. These things will happen. Sky and earth will wear out. My words won't wear out. But be on your guard. Don't let the sharp edge of your expectation get dulled by parties and drinking and shopping. Otherwise, that day is going to take you by complete surprise, spring on you suddenly like a trap, for it's going to come on everyone, everywhere, at once. So whatever you do, don't go to sleep at the switch. Pray constantly that you will have the strength and wits to make it through everything that's coming and end up on your feet before the Son of Man. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
Well, it's been a fun few days of driving out there, hasn't it? Wasn't that something? I was out yesterday on Saturday afternoon. I had a nice slow ride. I saw several spin-outs. The ride that usually would have taken about 15 minutes took more like 35 with that big, wet, flaky snow. Still is pretty calm. No, I'm talking about Wednesday, during the first snowfall. Were any of you out on Wednesday afternoon during the first snow? Yeah, what a nightmare. And the reason it was a nightmare is because, just like every year, everybody forgot how to drive in the snow. How does this happen every single year? It's like the snow hits finally, and everyone in their cars goes, "Oh my gosh, it's snowing. Does that happen here? What do I do? What do I do? Okay, remember your training. Make your own lane. Make your own lane. There's a piece of plastic where my turn signal used to be. What do I do now?" How does this happen every year? We know it's coming. We have time to be prepared. We have time to get ready. But no, every year it's the same thing. The first snow falls, and so does our brain's capacity for retaining basic snow driving technique. And lest you think I'm speaking about everybody but me, I have to fully admit that on Wednesday I was driving slow enough to be passed by a tortoise with a scooter. But that's because I drive with focus, and with safety, and with fear. Today's gospel reading had a lot to say about fear. This section comes right after Jesus has used his prophetic voice to predict the siege of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple. He warns the crowd that if the Jews attempt to rise up against Rome, to try to use violence and insurrection, you will be crushed. And yet, some 40 years later, this is what happens. Jesus is doing this ministry like 30 to 33 CE, Common Era, but then there in 70 CE, the temple falls. The Jews try to attempt an insurrection, and indeed they are put down by Rome, and it's a slaughter. These people who Jesus is talking to, they're people who live in fear. They are oppressed people. They are occupied people. Rome does not give them a lot of reasons to live without fear. So knowing this about them and having compassion for them, Jesus then gives them warning not to turn to violence in their fear. He knows the two just don't mix. And then, when we enter into today's text, something changes. The signs change. They become worldwide now. and it seems like all hell is broken loose. That's how Eugene Peterson has put it in The Message, this contemporary paraphrase of the Bible, that all hell is broken loose. The sun, the moon, the stars, the earth, the sea is in uproar. There's people in a panic. The wind is knocking them down. People are quaking. But it does not end there. Jesus cannot end on fear because Jesus is perfect love, and perfect love casts out fear. And he says, just when things seem at their worst, that's when I'm going to show up. That's when there's new life, new redemption, a new world. And then here's the part of the passage which feels very Advent to me. He goes on to say, but be on your guard. Don't let the sharp edge of your expectation get dulled. Otherwise, that day is going to come and take you by complete surprise, spring on you suddenly like a trap. So whatever you do, don't go to sleep at the switch. Advent is the beginning of the church year. I don't know if you knew that, but today is the first day of the church calendar. Happy New Year. And as we enter this 4 weeks leading into Christmas with Advent, it's the season of the church year when we intentionally lean into mystery. It's a season of preparation for the arrival of Jesus, of anticipation of a new world to come, of being vigilant about keeping open to the Spirit around us. Essentially, it's 4 weeks of not going to sleep at the switch. Now, there's plenty to keep us busy in Advent. Enough that if we go to sleep at the switch, things just aren't going to happen. So, for example, some of you parents of young children, you were here at what, by at least 9:15 for rehearsal for the Christmas Eve worship service on 4 o'clock. So your kids can be part of the choir. So you were here bright and early for that. Some of you are planning to host parties. Some of you are planning to go to parties. Some of you have your stuff together enough that you're sending out Christmas cards with elaborate letters detailing all the updates from your life this last year. Good for you. I think I did that once. Some of you are able to do this year by year. There's the phone calls to make and the Skype calls. There's travel and trips and hotels and pull-out couches. There's traditions and TV specials, concerts and worship, carol and parties, and the annual Google searches about what is wassail and how do I make figgy pudding. If you fall asleep at the switch when you've got all of that and when all is said and done, you just might miss Christmas. Have you ever felt exhausted by Advent? Or have you ever known someone that to watch them at Advent is just exhausting? This week, Kelly and I fell into a pair of tickets to go see Noises Off at the Guthrie Theater. And it was a wonderful show. And just full disclosure, we went on Wednesday, which was the day of that first snowfall. So you can be assured that when we were driving home, I was driving home slow enough that it was like I was playing the board game Operation, and the road was the guy laying down, and my minivan was the tweezers. Just very slow. Now, Noises Off is a really rapid-fire comedy, and it has all these characters all over the stage doing all these different things at once. So these two are over here talking while these two are over here are prepping something, and then eventually all these things collide, and they go this way and that. It's a very rapid-fire pace, breakneck speed, unlike my driving. It's a lot to take in. Now, I'd seen the play before live, and I had seen the movie. Kelly had never seen it before, so I asked her, what did you think about it? And she said, it's exhausting to watch. And friends, I wonder if God ever sees us in our hustle and bustle in Advent and thinks the same thing. This is exhausting to watch. Perhaps it's possible that if we look busy enough, God won't bother us about staying on guard, about not falling asleep at the switch. Maybe if we look busy, we just busy ourselves, we can avoid any fear. Sometimes we're afraid to see all the work involved in changing the world and looking out for our neighbor, in addition to all the work we're trying to do to improve our own lives. And yet, when yet another abhorrent news story about a disgraceful, obvious injustice pops up, we can feel our hearts tugged toward it, pulling us to look to see what's happening. That tug in our heart is God asking us, do you see what I see? Do you see the pain that I see? Do you see the hurt that I see? Do you see the brokenness in my world that I need your help to fix and mend? Do you see what I see? Can we take action instead of bout of fear, even in Advent, when there's so much to do? Later this afternoon at 1 o'clock, the young adult team is going to host another of our new workshops called Adulting 101. Adulting is this word that young people often use ironically, which means doing something which makes you feel like an adult. So, for example, I did the laundry and I didn't get bleach all over everything. Adulting. Or I changed my oil in my car for the first time. Adulting. That kind of thing. So it's an ironic word, but we've been doing these workshops this fall, and they've been a big hit. They're geared toward young adults in our neighborhood, though everyone's welcome. And the topic today is slacktivist to activist. If you don't know the word slacktivist, that's a portmanteau of the words slacker and activist. Slacktivist to activist. Well, what's a slacktivist? Well, that's someone who they do feel good things, but with minimal effort, that on the surface appear to support a cause, but ultimately they don't do much at all. So, for example, on social media, they might put up a photo or share a story that shows, I really feel this cause, but they never actually reach out to the organizations who are doing something about the cause. Or in life, they'll wear a wristband to spread awareness, but they don't call their congressperson who could actually do something about the policies in place, or give cold hard cash to the organizations who are trying to fight for change. A slacktivist expresses concern, but is too busy to do anything about it. Now, sometimes it's because they think what they're doing is enough, or sometimes it's because they're afraid to do the real work. They feel busy, but they're asleep at the switch. And today, we're going to have 4 speakers at Adulting 101, including 2 Hennepin members, who are going to tell attendees what tugged at their heart to take action, how they saw like God sees, and how they couldn't let busyness mask fear of being on guard for all the ways that Jesus shows up. And we hope that the attendees will be inspired to partner with God to actively love our neighbors. Because, friends, when all hell is broken loose and the sun and the moon and the stars and the earth and the sea are in an uproar and everyone all over the world is in a panic and the wind is knocking them out by the threat of doom and the powers that be are quaking, we don't need awareness, we need action. It's why our church is hosting Reverend Jim Wallace on January 12th for an event called Race, Religion, and Response. We want everyone there. We want this room filled. We want you there. We want you to invite your friends. We want something great to happen. Reverend Jim Wallace is going to give a keynote address that night on anti-racism through a religious, faith-filled response. If you don't know the word anti-racism, it's simply the actions we take to oppose racism. If you're doing something to oppose racism, to stop it, that is anti-racism. He's going to give a keynote about that, and then he's going to moderate a panel of local activists and experts who are doing anti-racism work so that we can hear how can we do this in our local community. Our panel's great. We got Dr. Curtis DeYoung from the Minnesota Council of Churches, Jaylani Hussein from the Committee on American Islamic Relations, Sandra Samuels from the Northside Achievement Center, and maybe 1 or 2 more. We're working on it. And we're gathering local anti-racism groups to have tables there so you can get connected to take action with them. Sometimes we don't know where to start, and hopefully these groups will be here that you can start with them. And we're reading Jim's book on racism and how to actively work on anti-racism together. We're going to read it in our life groups. It's going to be our sermon series. We're going to start brand new life groups just for this book. And you can get your ticket today. And you can get your book today. And you can tell that and this is a huge deal. Because if Advent is a time when we're trying to prepare for all the ways that Jesus is showing up, I think Jesus is showing up in the hard but necessary work of anti-racism. And that's something that our church is going to be looking at, not just looking at, but doing in the new year. Now, friends, I want to tell you that this is the part of the sermon where I was about to list this whole long litany of various individuals and groups in our city and in our world who need our attention and help. They need us to extend a hand in compassion, and they need us to lend a hand to fix systematically broken systems of justice. I was going to do that, and my sermons are usually about 12 note cards long, so I have like note cards. It's about 12 note cards long. This is the bottom of note card 9. And I had this litany. It was about 2 note cards long, and I deleted it. I deleted it because I thought, instead of me listing who God may have in your heart, please take a moment to listen to God reveal who is in your heart. So I'm going to invite you to sit comfortably, and we're going to take 1 minute to pray. I'm going to invite you to close your eyes if you like. I'll give you a verbal preamble, and then I'll give you 1 minute of silence. So friends, close your eyes and picture people to see if you can see as God sees. Picture a person you personally know, a person whose life is quaking because all hell is broken loose. Picture a person or group in your city who is knocked down by the wind. Picture a person or group in this world who it feels like the sky is falling down all around them. Take 1 moment, 1 minute to see as God sees these people on your hearts. Friends, these are the people by which we see Jesus. As we prepare for the arrival of Jesus in Advent, these are the people we had to break through the busyness, cast out our fear, and reach out to in compassion and in justice. Friends, Advent is a season of transitioning to intentionally leaning into mystery, preparing, anticipating, being vigilant. Every year it shows up, just like the first snow, and sometimes we forget how to do it. We get caught up in busyness and fear, instead of truly looking for Jesus, and when we see Jesus, taking action. So friends, may Advent not be a season of exhaustion, but may it be a season of inspiration and action for you. May it keep you awake to see as God sees. May it be so, and amen.